My name's Heather Teal. I live in Applecross in the Highlands, northwest coast of Scotland. It's a very remote location. It's probably about as remote as you can get on the mainland. Over the Christmas period, we all had the flu. My son started first on Christmas Day, then me, my mother, and then Bethany. So by New Year, she was struggling. I took her to the doctor and I was told again that it was flu. By the time we got to the 5th day, she was struggling to breathe. They couldn't get a reading for her blood pressure. It was dangerously low, and we were airlifted to Regmore Hospital in Inverness. She went into cardiac arrest pretty much on the way up to the ward. She was intubated and wired up to absolutely everything, and there was somebody doing CPR. I was sitting at the end of her bed. They allowed me to sit there and hold her left leg, stroking her leg and willing her to live. Your brain is not wired to lose a child. It's the most horrific thing. And it's a physical pain when you lose a child. It's physical. I couldn't imagine how my life was going to continue. Sorry. And then after about 3 days, I guess, I answered the phone and it was a reporter from the local press. What I didn't realise at the time was that once they put it through to be published, every other editor can see that, and I was just inundated. Every time I answered the phone, it was a different newspaper, or it was one of Bethany's friends telling me that they were asking them questions. It was TV companies, it was Sky News, and every time I picked up my phone, there was a message from somebody. Every time I picked up the house phone, there was a reporter on it. It was constant. Every time the phone went, there was a fear. A real fear that, what was I going to be asked this time? They rang and messaged other people within the community. It just felt relentless. Trying to sensationalise the fact that an 18-year-old hadn't had a flu jab. It was sepsis that killed her, and all they wanted was some sensational story. One newspaper asked me how it felt being in intensive care watching my daughter die, what was going through my head at the time. And I put the phone down and he rang back several times, carrying on with the questions despite me breaking down. One reporter actually asked me why I wouldn't speak to him. When I said it was because I was grieving for my daughter, he said, yes, but I need you to speak to me because grief sells newspapers. That is one step too far. It's just, I can't even begin to tell you how much worse these people make the situation you're already going through. It's absolutely horrendous. To just constantly hound people, I just think is unforgivable. It's just, they nearly pushed me over the edge. They really did have me thinking about ending it all. There were photographs that were published in the newspapers of Bethany. Had they asked for a photograph, I would have provided one. But the ones that they had without permission. There was one of her receiving an award at school. That's a personal memory to me, to be there at the school and watch her get this award. It was one of the proudest moments of my life, and it's a moment I will treasure forever. And it's tainted because it was all over the newsstands for the wrong reasons. But for me, just at that moment in time, it was my story and it wasn't anybody else's. I didn't want to share it. I don't understand it. Surely there's a little bit of them that thinks, here's somebody whose world has just completely fallen apart. And I need to leave her alone. But they don't. I don't know. I just don't know. I just know that they need to stop.
My name's Luke Hart. At the moment we live in Surrey and I work in technology.
And I'm Ryan Hart. I live with Luke, and I'm an engineer. So on the 19th of July in 2016, our father killed our mum and our sister. And this was only 5 days after we had left him, in an attempt to try and get a better life away from him, away from his control, his abuse. Our father was influenced by what he'd read in the media. His murder note was constructed from previous reports of other domestic homicides. His search history on his computer was full of, men who murder their families, trying to figure out, what would be said about him when he went through with his plan. And so he was definitely looking to see what the media response would be before he committed the murders.
The media descended on Spalding. And there was helicopters, there was people everywhere, there was journalists jumping through people's windows that we knew, trying to get quotes that they could use. The media reporting showed an overwhelming sympathy and concern for our father and a total lack of concern for Mum and Charlotte, who seemed to just be props in our father's story, right? They were just collateral damage to our father's poor mental health. But our father didn't have mental health issues in the traditional sense. What he had was an obsession with control. The media had framed things exactly how our father would always frame them. And for Ryan and I, the biggest shock was seeing reports and stories of our family that weren't our stories, they were his. A lot of them mentioned the suicide note he left behind at the scene, and that was a suicide note to him, but it was a murder note to us, and much of the content was explaining why he wanted to kill us all. The day that we left, Mum, basically, she made him sandwiches, right, and left him a note saying, I'll email you. We took ketchup, because that was the only thing we had. We just got pizza and ketchup, and that was literally going to be our lunch when we got to the new house. And one of the reasons our father was going to murder us all was because we took ketchup, and we should have known how much he likes ketchup. The narratives were incredibly misogynistic. Even the reports that were supposed to be from kind of neutral, sophisticated outlets, they didn't understand domestic abuse, right? They just didn't get it. They were making all sorts of assumptions, even providing excuses for our father. People were saying, oh, he must have had a hard childhood, saying he was a good guy who was always caring, and well, they were giving him a lot of eulogising, a lot of sympathy.
And on top of the sympathy we saw for our father, there was a lot of attack on our mum's character. People who didn't know our families would give quotes and they would be taken out of context and turned into statements of fact. And one was that our mum had apparently had an affair. Also another one was assumptions that our mum was leaving our father for the money. It was devastating, I think, for us to read. She was the most amazing woman I'd ever known. She'd been through so much suffering in her life, and I could, it was unbearable what she'd been through. And it really achieved what our father wanted, was after the murders, for him and his story to live on, and for Mum and Charlotte to be seen as, the villains and him the victim.
And also it was just embarrassing because it made me sort of reflect on the fact that being a man, whatever the standard for that is so incredibly low that you can murder your family and you're still a good guy. Hearing all of that made us so blindly angry that the only thing we could do after the murders was basically shut ourselves off. And we just stopped living, basically. Or we looked after our dogs, we went for walks. And that was, for me, the only way to sort of process it was just to disconnect from it.
I think being forced to shut off completely certainly, delayed our recovery from what we've been through.
My name is Mandy Garner. I live in Northfield in Essex. I have 4 children. I'm a journalist, and I also work for a human rights organisation. On the 19th of February, my daughter was out with her boyfriend and his friend in Brixton, and a car which was going over 60 miles an hour went through 2 red lights and then hit my daughter, flinging her up into the air, and didn't stop. That happened at 9:45 at night, and the police came to our house at 2 o'clock in the morning. My other daughter, Maya, and I were awake, they told us what had happened, and they stayed with us until sort of first thing in the morning, and then we had to basically wait for our other children to wake up to tell them And it was at midday that day that the Daily Mail put the CCTV video of what had happened up on their website. My brother-in-law saw it and my brother saw it. So they told me about it. I mean, I just thought it was obvious to me that it was a clickbait type story. It was just it was just a kind of voyeuristic thing to get clicks. So what seemed to have happened was that the Daily Mail said they had the CCTV footage. They bought it from the shop that was opposite where she was crossing the road. The police said, don't put it up. The Daily Mail said, you can't stop us, we're going to put it up. The police said, at least give us some time to tell the family. And the Daily Mail said, well, you've got an hour. They came up with it was in the public interest. The story was to bring forward witnesses. And then I looked at the headline again, and the headline is, and I've got it written down here, it's exclusive, first of all, exclusive in capital letters. Shocking moment, young woman is killed by speeding hit-and-run driver escaping police as she is flung 20 feet into the air and lands in front of horrified onlookers at London bus stop. That is the headline. There's nothing in there that suggests that they want witnesses to come forward or that is in the public interest. That is just, watch this video of this girl who's just about to get killed. And so I put in a complaint to IPSO for intrusion into grief. So IPSO asked me some questions, and then they sent those to the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail then replied. Then I had to reply to the Daily Mail, and this went on backwards and forwards for a long time. And every time that I got an email, it just brought it back up again. So you're constantly reliving that night. And then they came out saying it wasn't an intrusion into grief. I was literally shaking. I was so angry and upset. So then I wrote back to IPSO. They said, maybe you could help out with training our people about how to handle these cases. And I was like, really? I mean... And then they said that the video was quite grainy, so you wouldn't be able to know who it was. Anybody who knows my daughter knows that that's about her. My children know that that's about her. And they said that it was sensitively edited. So it was edited so that it didn't show the actual impact, just the moments before. That is not sensitive. That is the worst part, because that's the bit as a parent that you play over and over in your head, that those seconds, those last seconds, what was going through her head, and you were trying to save her, you know? That's all I do. No, I'm just trying to save her. I couldn't.
Why does the law in this country allow them to do it? Why do people who have suffered a tragedy not get some form of protection from that? Without a shadow of a doubt, they are going to damage people, and eventually somebody will harm themselves because of it. And it has to stop.
These men who kill their families, they are conscious about what is said about them after the fact. And therefore, if we can improve the quality of reporting, then hopefully that will reduce the instances of domestic homicide.
This kind of regulation that is by the press, for the press, it's not working. I just do feel a duty to talk about it, because we can do better. We must do better.